Well, back on Steel and Vance, and again, we're talking politics. It feels like we're in a constant wheel of whether it's federal or south of the border in the United States or here provincially or municipally.
Are you looking forward to heading to the polls again?
I don't know. Which ones are we heading to
Well,
this time,
we are going to
Linda?
head to the polls in BC in October, so it's still like about, my math is not great, 8 months or so away, and yet it feels like the race is already on. There's a lot of sniping going on, and you look at the polls, and the polls are showing the EB government has a pretty strong lead, but in politics, anything can happen.
Anything is
in
possible,
a matter of
yeah.
weeks or months.
But we like talking about it.
So we want to talk about it because it, of course, affects all of us. So we thought, let's talk to a guy who's right embedded in the political world at the PC legislature. CHEK's political analyst Rob Shaw is joining us. Hi, Rob.
Hi there.
Can we talk about the budget deficit first? Because people are going, oh my gosh, it's the biggest deficit BC is seeing in a budget release. And yet also kind of a stand pat kind of a budget, which leads some people to suspect they're holding back some money and some goodies and announcements as we move closer to the election.
Oh, for sure. I think we learned from this budget that there is a much more exciting budget to come later this year in the form of the NDP platform, because you can't take this document to voters with a massive deficit, but not with a lot of increased real kind of financial relief for people, very small scale financial credits. There was a really popular decision to fund in vitro fertilization treatment, the first round for people, but it barely cost a few tens of millions of dollars in an $80 billion budget. So they're not the kind of big programs that I think a lot of us expected the NDP to be rolling out right before an election, which makes me think and others think that this is just kind of to get us through this pre-election period this spring, and then the big kind of show begins later this summer as we get closer to that October election.
And then the cookies get handed out. I'm really excited about that IVF bit, by the way, as somebody who went through it and paid the money for it, the tens of thousands of dollars to have my miracle baby. So I'm just going to put that out there for those who are struggling. That's good news there. Let's now talk about polling, because, I mean, right now it depends on who you ask as to how this might all come together come election day. What are you seeing in the polls with regard to where everything is at? Crystal ball time for us.
Yeah, well, everyone from all parties, if you talk to them privately, will tell you that we're so far away from the election, really, that anything could happen. But the polls today indicate that if we had an election right now, and you believe in polling, we would have a supermajority New Democrat government in the realm of, 70 some odd seats of a 93-seat new legislature, which is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that's going to depend on the wild card in BC politics right now, the BC Conservatives. They poll very high. They're the second most popular party in polling, and yet they don't really exist in a sense. They have two MLAs who weren't elected Conservatives. They defected there. They have a number of candidates, some of whom are impressive, some of whom are not. They have confusion with the federal Conservatives, and we're all watching this, trying to figure out if it's real. And if it is real, then it splits that center-right vote that the BC Liberals had in the past. It creates opportunities for the NDP to win ridings they've never won, and it opens the door for the NDP to have an enormous victory this fall. But it all hinges on whether or not people who think in polling questions they might support the Conservatives 8 months from now will be willing to vote for them in that kind of moment of clarity at the ballot box.
Yeah, and I think that they're also riding that federal wave of Conservative support with Pierre Poilievre, perhaps. But let's talk about the BC United Party, because Kevin Falcon cannot be happy right now. Rebrands the party. This was his big push to maybe get the Premier's chair, and yet he's coming in third place right now. I mean, what is going on? What is collapsing about the BC United vote?
Well, there's a few things. One is that no one pays attention to the opposition party until right before an election. So it's really tough for him to get out the fact that he has changed the name of the party. I don't think it was the wrong move to change the name. I think the larger collapse of the federal Liberal Party, the desire to separate BC Liberals from federal Liberals, is probably going to turn out to be the right move. It's very hard in this day and age to sort of get the public's attention before an election. So people think BC United's a soccer team. They don't know this kind of Kevin Falcon guy, even though he used to be in politics. And you see I think you're absolutely right. You see the confusion that the BC Conservatives are somehow the federal Conservatives. And that, that's an opportunity, I think, for BC United to try and line up with the federal Conservatives, try to get through that confusion. But it's going to be really, really hard. And I think their path is going to be to propose some really big, cut through the fog ideas for the public who like the idea and then remember maybe who it came from. Oh, yeah, it's that weird sounding party. That's the only way to kind of break through voter attention in this day and age.
So was there an olive branch of some sort sent from the BC Conservatives to BC United to maybe join forces and try and align with one another versus what sounds like a pretty powerful NDP this far out?
Not really. No, you got to remember that BC Conservative leader John Rustad and BC United leader Kevin Falcon hate each other.
Right.
They do not want to merge. They don't want to talk. They don't want to be in the same room together. There are some people in the community, mainly the business community, that could try and force this, but they have been unable to do so. And so I think when we talk mergers of those two parties, that was a hypothetical, brief window possibility before Christmas. There's too many candidates in place by both parties and ridings. If you merge them now, who would run? You'd have BC Conservatives saying, we're ahead in the polls. The incumbent MLA in, say, Peace Region, Mike Bernier, should resign, and the Conservative leading the polls should take that riding. And neither party is going to accept that. And so I think the idea of a merger is dead in the water. You sort of have to, unfortunately, watch the kind of, I think, chaos that might ensue in the center right, and then pick up the pieces after the election, because right now the egos are just too big.
Well, we have to talk about the BC Greens because the leader, Sonia Furstenau, all of a sudden announced she's going to run in a different riding. They used to have some sway when they were kind of teamed up a little bit with the Oregon government. And the BC Greens, where are they at now? They just seem like they're like the federal Greens, just stuck in the same place.
They remind me a bit of the federal NDP in the sense that when you partner with the governing party, you tend to get kind of wiped off the map once that partnership ends, and that's what the federal NDP is facing. The Greens have 2 MLAs. Sonia Furstenau is moving ridings because the riding she was in got redrawn. It would have been harder for her to win. So she's moving now to Victoria. It's going to be even harder, actually, in Victoria Beacon Hill to win. Adam Olsen, he looks okay in Saanich North. And then the Greens, they've always had 2 other ridings. One is the West Van Sea to Skye, they almost won last election, and one is Nelson Creston. But they don't I'm not sure how organized they are in either of those ridings right now. So they're really fighting, and Sonia Furstenau will tell you this, and you talk to her, fighting for maybe, in a best case scenario, 4 MLAs. In a worst case scenario, well, I guess it would be 0, but more likely 1. And that's sort of the margin of error that the Greens have going into this election.
Fascinating chat. Thanks for setting the table for us as always, Rob Shaw. We appreciate you.
Anytime. We can chat all about this as the election gets closer.
Yeah,
well,
thanks so much.
Have you back.
I mean, it never ends in this province. No. Online, people are just sniping away at each other from the different political parties. I'm tired of it between the Trump and everybody is mad at Trudeau and Poilievre, and now the political sniping going on back and forth. Never ends.
Constant state of campaigning. We're inundated with it. What are the promises and what are things that are actually going to move things forward? We'll be talking about it again, I'm sure, my friend. Later on in the show, this is a good news one, a happy ending involving a massive donation hitting med students. Yeah, it's a happy ending not to be missed.
And also, Vancouver wants to welcome the world, but where will they stay? We have got a serious shortage of hotel rooms in the lead up to some pretty major events. The CEO of Destination Vancouver joins us with his thoughts next.
All right, let's get to the viewing party, brought to you by the BCRFA. Hello, Marcy.
We have Margaret watching in Burnaby. Hello, Margaret.
And another Margaret. This one's in Surrey. Hello there.
And Maryland. Thank you all for watching.
It's all the M's lined up in our viewing party. Viewing party at CHEKmedia.ca. Up for grabs, a $100 gift card for the Cactus Club. We'll hand that out at the end of the show.